The National Desk, America's News, now.
Right now on the National Desk, the White House declares a national health emergency. Monkeypox cases rising from coast to coast. We're looking inside the decision and why some say it may have come too late. Happening right now, millions of people dealing with record heat, the weather driving devastating wildfires and serious droughts. How long these dangerous conditions are expected to last. And a deep red state votes to protect abortion rights. The other states considering the same move and the action the president has already taken. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Eugene Ramirez. On this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and a look ahead at what to expect. We're following four big stories this week. The latest job numbers showing falling unemployment and job growth around the country. White House officials declaring monkeypox a national health emergency. Dangerous heat, wildfires, and flooding happening across America, and a vote on abortion in the heartland, raising questions about the battles still underway in states nationwide. We begin with that latest jobs report released Friday showing some bad news for America's economy. The U.S. adding another 528,000 jobs last month, with growth in major categories like construction, leisure and hospitality, healthcare, and manufacturing. Unemployment also falling, ticking down to 3.5%. The Federal Reserve says slowing the job market is an important piece of their plan to bring down rampant inflation without causing a recession. They'll use these numbers at their next meeting in September, where they're going to decide whether or not to raise interest rates once again. Now, it is a time of economic uncertainty for so many, with high prices and, of course, talks of a potential recession. New signs every day showing many Americans and small businesses expect things to get worse. But as the National Desk, Satra El-Nashar reports, some key groups are more confident in the future of our economy.
While Wall Street rallies, Main Street worries. Heads of some big banks and major companies projecting optimism after a strong earnings season, brushing off fears of an economic downturn. Restaurant Brands International, owner of fast food chains like Burger King, the latest to beat earnings expectations.
We were really excited about the overall performance. We were up 14% in system-wide sales for the quarter.
Many on Wall Street hoping the Federal Reserve has already rolled out its most aggressive interest rate hikes in their fight against inflation, taking stock in falling gas prices and stabilizing jobs numbers. President of the St. Louis Fed says not so fast.
We've still got some ways to go here to get to restrictive monetary policy.
Predicting a strong second half of this year, but says it'll take more time for inflation to come down than what the market expects. Confidence on Wall Street, but many small business owners have a different outlook. More than half of them in a new CNBC survey say we're already in a recession. 77% expect inflation to get worse. This farmer in Iowa says there's no getting around it.
No matter what we have to buy, if it's impacted by energy or trucking especially, the prices are just way higher than anything we've ever seen.
Price pain felt across sectors. The Conservative Job Creators Network Foundation tracking small business sentiment.
When you're having triple price increases, how do you pass that on in low margin industries like the restaurant business?
Many have to pass on higher costs to customers. With the inflation rate at a 41-year high, many are turning to credit cards to keep up. Balances increasing by $46 billion in the second quarter of the year, according to the New York Fed. The next major indicator of where the economy's headed comes Friday morning with the release of July's jobs report. In Washington, I'm Satra El-Nashar reporting.
Meantime, gas prices on the decline, dropping more than 50 straight days. The national average at $4.11 right now as of Friday. That's according to AAA. Gas buddies saying the price could fall under $4 over the next week or two. Now, this is in part due to dropping oil prices. U.S. crude dropping to less than $91 a barrel this week, the lowest price since early February. U.S. oil reaching its high mark at about $124 a barrel. That was back in early March. Now, this week in Washington, the Secretary of Health declared monkeypox a national emergency. So far, more than 7,000 Americans have been infected with the monkeypox virus, which causes fevers, body aches, chills, fatigue, and bumps throughout the body. Now, declaring an emergency gives medical providers additional funding to respond to this outbreak. Officials say the funding will be used to produce more vaccines, and right now demand is outpacing supply. So far, the strategy in the U.S. has been to get it to the states with the highest number of cases, states like Illinois, California, and New York. The virus right now is spreading through close contact and mainly in men who have sex with men.
Concern is that it's going to expand to other patient populations and other groups.
We're prepared to take our response to the next level in addressing this virus, and we urge every American to take monkeypox seriously and to take responsibility to help us tackle this virus.
The Biden administration has named a national monkeypox response coordinator. Robert Fenton, a regional administrator for FEMA, will now coordinate the federal government's response to the outbreak. His deputy is the CDC's director for HIV/AIDS prevention, Dr. Dimitri Deskalakis. They're tasked with increasing access to tests, vaccines, and treatment. But some officials are criticizing the Biden administration, saying this action is just too little, too late. The National Desk's Christine Frizzau explains why some are comparing the federal government's response to this virus to its COVID-19 response.
It's become a familiar sight, but an unwelcome one. Long lines stretching down city blocks for those waiting to get vaccines, this time for monkeypox, a disease often marked by painful rashes and flu-like symptoms like fever and headache. More than 95% of reported cases are among men who have sex with men, with close to 6,000 cases already reported in the United States.
Monkeypox has never transmitted this widely before in the United States in particular.
It's a reality many believe could have been avoided. With new warnings, it's about to become the next public health failure. Dr. Scott Gottlieb drawing concerning connections between the response to monkeypox and to COVID-19, like delays in testing and vaccine production, absence of coordination among federal agencies, and a slow-moving CDC stymied by bureaucracy.
This can't be our response every time, that when CDC drops the ball, the White House and the political leadership need to step in. That's what's happened here. It happened in COVID. We need to fundamentally reform how we respond to these crises.
Dr. Gottlieb and others believe that reform needs to come from the CDC, but there are a few problems: a lack of resources at the agency, a lack of trust by the public, and a Congress that so far has little appetite to help.
It's going to be difficult to navigate the politics of this as we know COVID response has become a partisan issue. More money for response, be it to COVID or monkeypox, has come up against resistance in Congress.
One other warning: time is running out. That the increase of diseases show us that dangerous pathogens are here to stay, and the next one could be even worse. I'm Christine Frizzau reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Right now, new details on the head-on car crash that left a U.S. Congresswoman and 3 other people dead. Police in Elkhart County, Indiana, say the car representative Jackie Walorski and 2 staff members were crossed the center line, hitting another car head-on. All 4 people involved in that crash died. Representative Walorski was 58 years old. She was from South Bend, first elected to Congress in 2012, serving Indiana's 2nd District. Many remembering her as a dedicated public servant, known for her tenacity and commitment to helping others. The Congresswoman was elected for Indiana's 2nd Congressional District in 2012. With her seat now vacant, a special session may have to happen. On Wednesday, the president will sign into law an expansion of health care and disability benefits for veterans exposed to burn pits. This week, senators voting 86-11 to pass this bill, reaching an agreement with Republicans who blocked it last week despite initially showing some support. Now, there's been lots of back and forth between Republicans and Democrats over the veterans health bill. This week, our fact-check team digging into the controversy behind the legislation to get to the bottom and to get to the real story.
The Senate taking a vote on the PACT Act for a 3rd time tonight. Connor with our fact check team joining me here to give us some deeper context on this. So what is going on here, Connor? Why did they have to vote on it so many times now?
It's all about Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey's concerns that he brought up. He wanted to make sure the spending bill would be discretionary and flexible and not what they call mandatory.
And so why was this so important to him and a few other Republicans?
It's a little technical, so I called some congressional staffers today to get an answer. For one, they say discretionary spending is easier to keep an eye on and change, but here's their main issue. If the money that has been budgeted for the PACT Act were to become mandatory, then there would be a $400 billion discretionary hole left that Congress could choose to fill up with any other project they want. Senator Toomey says his amendment is just a technical fix for that, and it doesn't cut any spending on veterans.
So it begs the question tonight, Connor, why wasn't this amendment introduced the first time that the bill came up for a vote?
And that's a good question, Ryan. And we looked into the bill history and found that the mandatory spending provision was written the exact same way the first time the bill was voted on. And because of the timing, Democrats are saying this was all just a political game Republicans play to get back at Manchin's compromise for the Democrats' new health care and climate change spending bill.
Connor, tonight with some deeper context on this important topic. Thank you so much for that. And the Fact Check team will continue to follow developments on this and several other issues. You can also read this story, links to where they found all of their information on our website. You see it right there, thenationaldesk.com.
Still to come, an Amazon driver run over by their own delivery vehicle. The shocking crime, the disturbing trend it's bringing more attention to.
The road to jail sometimes starts with a crisis in the classroom. I'm Kayla Gaskins in Washington.
You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget you can watch us live weekdays 6 a.m. till 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We're back after this. The National Desk team of reporters bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Maryland, where a woman says her sister is lucky to be alive after she was run over by a carjacker.
Picture that it's your loved one. Like, how could you do that to somebody that you loved?
For Tiffany Nicolette, it was the worst kind of wake-up call. From police Saturday morning, news about her sister.
Her sister was carjacked and they ran over her with her own car.
Her sister, Chelsea Nicolette, she says a single mother of three working her second job as an Amazon delivery driver, picking up that pre-dawn shift so that she would have time later to spend at the pool with her daughter. She'd never make it home. Here near 37th and Beach, it was roughly her third stop.
She got out to deliver a package. Again, she had her keys with her on her belt loop. She heard the door slam and she turned around and saw somebody driving off in her car.
Her personal vehicle with a push-button start. Nicolette says it didn't take long for the thief to realize he couldn't get far without the keys, still on Chelsea's belt.
He turned around and slammed on the gas and plowed right into her. He said, "Where are the keys?" B. Yeah. And he ripped it off of her belt loop with no regard for her life, for, you know, the fact that she's a mother.
Baltimore police reporting carjackings up 71% in the first 3 weeks of this year, 371 in 365 days.
In Texas, drones are interfering with helicopters trying to battle wildfires. Officials say drones flying over wildfires prevents them from being able to drop water. The latest incident forced helicopters to be grounded for 3 hours. The FAA regulates where drones can fly and specifically prohibits them from flying over emergency or rescue operations.
8% of the households in the United States, they own a drone. And so people think they spend $1,000, they can do whatever they want with their drone, but that's not true.
Officials say as more people buy and fly drones, the more potential the problem has to grow. In the past few years, there have been more than 100 cases of drones flying near wildfires. In Iowa, mobile home residents say a new bill increasing the number of days a landlord has to notify tenants about raising rent does not address the real problem. Residents say they want controlled rent and solutions to the no-cause evictions they've been forced to comply with.
We have many residents that are disabled, retired on fixed incomes, living only on Social Security. So that makes it exceptionally hard for them to meet these increases.
The Iowa Manufactured Home Residents Network wants lawmakers to amend the bill to better protect tenants. In Las Vegas, violence in schools has escalated so much, one student has taken his personal safety into his own hands. 15-year-old Ian Bayless wore a bulletproof vest to class every day last year after being jumped by bullies when he started high school. The Clark County School District recently released a report showing staff confiscated 31 handguns, 1 long gun, 33 air guns, and 174 knives from students in a single year.
You don't know if you're going to get a phone call if the school shootings happen, or your kid got shot, or kids getting beat up, or because since the 5th grade I've worried about every time that phone rings, what happened now?
Ian's father says despite filing police reports, the students who attacked his son were never disciplined by the district. New data shows the quality of a student's education can affect how likely it is a child will end up behind bars. The National Desk's Kayla Gaskins looks into the extent of the damage caused by the crisis in the classroom.
A poor education equals a ticket to a jail cell for some in underperforming urban schools.
And if you don't have that adequate education, you're already in prison. They just haven't closed the jail cell.
85% of kids in juvenile detention centers are labeled functionally low literate. The Justice Department reporting 70% of inmates cannot read above the 4th grade level. Funding, apparently not the issue. Public schools in New York City, Boston, Washington, D.C., and Atlanta spend the most per student, all considered failing by certain metrics.
The problem is when you don't have any incentive to spend the money wisely, the money goes towards administrative bloat and staffing surges, and the government school system doesn't particularly have a strong incentive to put that money into the classroom.
Baltimore City schools also poor performing. A lawsuit working its way through the Maryland court system aiming to address the disparity. Prominent civil rights attorney Ben Crump adding clout to the legal battle by jumping on board.
We know that there are issues with the system, and what we're trying to do is have all the stakeholders at the table to come up with some better solutions.
Some arguing school choice is the best solution for fixing the school to prison pipeline, pointing to a study done with Harlem Children's Zone, where the choice to attend a charter school resulted in a 100% reduction in crime for male students.
I think the better solution is from the bottom up. Give families a choice, fund the student directly, empower parents to choose, and that will give all schools, public and private, an incentive to do the right thing.
As the debate over solutions continues, the fallout from big cities failing public schools having an increasingly negative impact on its residents. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
An overseas visit causing lots of controversy. Coming up, the threats China is making after the House Speaker's trip to Taiwan and whether or not experts think they'll follow through. Plus, a devastating wildfire burning right now in California. The difficult conditions making this harder to stop. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan still causing controversy long after she's left. This week, China fired missiles toward the Taiwan Strait and has banned imports of at least 2,000 Taiwanese foods, with threats of more to come. There are also fears that China will use the supply chain to retaliate against the U.S. in the coming weeks.
China is part of supply chains for everything from washing machines to jet airplanes to computers. And they are happy to take that role. The Chinese are much better at using this as an overt tool of saying, we will hurt you, we will hurt your economy if you dare to cross us.
Now, Taiwan is self-governing, but China claims the island as its territory and opposes engagement between Taiwan's leaders and other countries like the U.S. So how significant is this trip to Taiwan, and what is Speaker Pelosi and President Biden's overall goal? Well, this week, our Megan O'Halloran asked founder and executive director of the National Security Institute, Jamil Jaffer.
Well, look, I think it's obviously an important trip. It sends a message from the Speaker of the House, the number 3 ranking individual in the U.S. government, that we stand by Taiwan and that we're close allies with them, and that we're not going to cave to Chinese pressure to not visit Taiwan, to not support that country and our allies there. Of course, for the Biden administration, it creates a tough situation because, as you well know, we have a one China policy. We, in theory, recognize Beijing's sovereignty over Taiwan, but that's not really the whole story because we have the Taiwan Relations Act and a relationship with Taiwan that is fundamentally different than any other country where we recognize one government. And so I think Speaker Pelosi is doing the right thing. I think, obviously, the Biden administration needs to do more to defend her right to go there and to stand by her and, frankly, to supply Taiwan with the weapons and capabilities it needs to defend itself against China.
Well, of course, China condemning the trip. Is this a dangerous trip? I mean, for Americans sitting at home, is there reason to have heightened fears?
Well, look, I think there is a chance that the Chinese get aggressive, and they made threats against Nancy Pelosi's plane. Obviously, that has not come to pass. She did sort of take the long way around, avoiding the South China Sea. But look, I mean, I think that we can't cave to Chinese pressure. Speaker Newt Gingrich went to Taiwan. The Chinese were upset about it back in those days. Speaker Pelosi is going now. So it does create more tension, no question. But this is the kind of tension, frankly, that America needs to provoke with our adversaries. We need to make clear to our adversaries that we will be strong defenders of our allies, and we will respond to adversary aggression. And so, China should be on notice. Russia, Iran, North Korea, you can't push the U.S. government around.
Yeah, you wonder about the ripple effect. And to expand on what you were talking about earlier, China's rhetoric, let's get into that a little bit. It does seem to be becoming more increasingly hostile. And to quote President Xi Jinping, he said, "Those who play with fire will get burned." Could this trip reverse any progress made between the U.S. and China?
Well, look, I think there's a possibility that it makes relations with China harder. But let's be candid, right? It is China that has provoked the challenge in relationship between us. It is the Chinese who have put pressure on economic issues, who've stolen huge amounts of intellectual property from the United States, who have threatened their neighbors, right? It's not what we're doing in the world. It's what China's doing in their own behavior that has provoked the situation between the U.S. It's their bad behavior in economics and international affairs. The U.S. is simply playing its role, and we can't cave to Chinese pressure. And so while it may make the relationship with China more tense, the reality is the Chinese brought this upon themselves.
Jamil, let's switch gears here a little bit. Let's talk about the counterterrorism operation involving Ayman al-Zawahiri. How significant is this for the U.S., and do you consider this a catastrophic loss for al-Qaeda?
Well, look, I think it is a big victory for the United States. Obviously, we've been on the hunt for Ayman al-Zawahiri, the old number 2 in al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, and then the number 1 in al-Qaeda after we took out bin Laden a decade ago. And it is, at some level, an important blow to al-Qaeda. But the challenge with al-Qaeda is they have a number 3. He will, or a number 2 now. He'll rise up to number 1, likely Sirajuddin Haqqani, who's actually a member of the Taliban government that's now in power in Afghanistan as their Minister of the Interior. So al-Qaeda is likely to survive this. They may go to ground for the next little bit. They may try to reform and regroup. But the reality is they represent a continuing threat to the United States. We need to keep the pressure on to keep Americans safe, both at home and abroad.
A lot to stay on top of there. Jamil Jaffer, thanks for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Dozens confirmed dead and more still missing. Coming up, the latest from Kentucky. The search for survivors and the recovery efforts now underway. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website now. The death of a South Carolina hospital worker killed by knee to the groin from a patient has been ruled a homicide. A Rhode Island man shares his experience with monkeypox, saying he would not wish this virus on his worst enemy. And a Florida woman crawled through 300 feet of dirty sewer to rescue a trapped kitten. Those stories and more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Don't miss it. Let's take a look now at a few stories we're following for you in the week ahead. On Monday, President Biden will travel to Kentucky to meet with families impacted by this week's devastating flooding. The Labor Department will release July's inflation numbers Wednesday, August 10th. Inflation predicted to stay high through the end of the year. And jury selection set to begin next Monday in the Chicago trial of R. Kelly. The singer is charged with child pornography and obstruction in Illinois. He's already been convicted of sex trafficking in New York. A decisive victory giving hope to pro-choice activists across the country.
Voters made it clear that politicians should not interfere with the fundamental rights of women.
The results coming out of Kansas and the other states hoping to follow. You're watching The National Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays 6 a.m. till 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Time. We'll be right back.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
A quick look now at our top stories this week. The latest jobs report blowing predictions out of the water. The economy adding 528,000 jobs in July, the 19th consecutive month of job growth. And the White House has declared monkeypox a national health emergency as cases rise across the country. This weekend, nearly 100 million Americans are dealing with record heat. Over the next week, 70% of the country will experience temps over 90 degrees after several long-standing records fell in Boston, Hartford, Connecticut, and Newark, New Jersey, just to name a few. In the Northeast, at least 2 heat-related deaths have been recorded over the past 2 weeks. And in the Pacific Northwest, take a look here. At least 22 deaths have been reported, 14 of those in Oregon, 8 in Washington state. The heat and dry conditions making fires in the West harder to contain. Right now, there are several burning in more than a dozen states. In California, the McKinney fire has killed at least 4 people. This week, we spoke to one woman who identified one of those victims as her brother, John Cogan. She says he ignored deputies when they ordered him to evacuate.
To know that my brother refused to move. He's always been a stubborn guy, so he did what he wanted to do. He's had troubles in his life, but he loved his animals.
The fire has burned more than 59,000 acres. It is California's largest wildfire of the year. Now, the heat will help dry out waterlogged communities in southeastern Kentucky, but it also presents a new danger for that hard-hit area. Temperatures are expected to climb into the 90s tomorrow with the added humidity, and it'll feel more like 100 degrees. The death toll in Kentucky remains at 37. Several still missing, however. Search and rescue crews still trying to get past washed out roads and destroyed bridges to look for survivors, but the incoming heat will make that task much more difficult.
It's going to get really, really hot, and that is now our new weather challenge.
With the heat, once it dries up through the day, it's just muggy, humid. People will suffocate. A lot of people on oxygen that don't have power are already suffering.
The state began transporting truckloads of bottled water to the region. It's for both first responders and the more than 7,000 people without electricity. 8 cooling shelters are also being opened there in the area. Now, this week, the surprising defeat of an abortion ban in Kansas, possibly setting the tone for the rest of the country. People in Kansas voting to protect the procedure in a traditionally Republican state. The National Desk's Kayla Gaskins looks into whether the surprising result will have a national impact.
A victory for abortion rights. On Tuesday, Kansans overwhelmingly rejected an amendment to remove the right to an abortion from their state constitution. A decisive 59% voted to strike down the amendment, a strong stance in a state where registered Republicans far outnumber registered Democrats. This was the first test of voters on abortion since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June.
Voters of Kansas sent a powerful signal that this fall the American people will vote to preserve and protect the right and refuse to let them be ripped away by politicians.
With Democrats' majorities in Congress under threat this November, they hope the abortion issue gives them a boost, or at least helps them avert electoral disaster.
Democrats have a lot of headwinds going into this election. The economic headwinds, general sour mood in the country. President's approval ratings are low, but this is something that could really alter the dynamic to the point where it may not be as bad as Democrats feared.
It's far from clear that a one-off vote on an abortion law will improve the political landscape for Democrats. Of the issues most important to voters heading into the midterms, abortion trailing behind others, such as the economy and inflation, guns, and crime. Meanwhile, other states, such as Indiana, which is on the verge of tightening restrictions, are still deciding the parameters of what will and won't be legal.
This is exactly what the Dobbs decision designed the next steps to be, which is kick it back to the states, let the people decide.
Guaranteeing the debate over abortion will continue long after November's midterm elections. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Now, Kansas, not the only state putting this issue on the ballot. This fall, California voters will decide if they want to include the right to an abortion and the right to contraceptives in their constitution. And in Vermont, people there voting on a similar measure. If it passes, Vermont's constitution will, quote, ensure that every person is afforded personal reproductive liberty. A new piece of bipartisan abortion legislation also moving through Congress. Our fact-check team looking into what that bill does and if it could actually pass.
Following the reversal of Roe v. Wade, a new bill from a group of bipartisan senators seeking to prevent states from banning abortions. I'm back tonight with our fact-check team. Courtney, earlier we looked at what states are doing on a case-by-case basis. Tonight, you looked at this federal legislation that is seeing support on both sides of the aisle.
That's right. So the bill is a joint effort to find a middle ground on abortion rights after 2 Democrat-led bills failed on the Senate floor this year. It aims to prevent states from passing laws that impose a, quote, undue burden on access to pre-viability abortions, while also allowing some reasonable limits on post-viability abortions. And it ensures access to contraception.
So that key term there, viability, what exactly does that mean in context of this legislation?
Well, it's unclear because the legislation doesn't specifically define define what viability means or what would be considered a threat to the mother's life, which means it would be up to healthcare providers to decide. But we looked into it, and fetal viability is generally considered to be around 24 weeks. So the legislation would allow state restrictions after that point, as long as it doesn't put the mother's life in danger.
But Connor, is this legislation, again, some bipartisan support here, likely to move forward in the process?
We've been digging into this, and it's unclear if this bill is even going to make it to the Senate floor. One of our sources from the Hill told us that there hasn't been much talk about it since it was introduced, and we learned that it's not going to go anywhere until after August recess. But one thing is for sure, it's likely to get opposition from Democrats for being too narrow and from Republicans who support banning abortion completely. And there's also concern that the bill won't get the 60 votes needed to pass because it would need 10 Republican votes to make it through. But only Senators Murkowski and Collins have publicly supported abortion rights. The bottom line is the bill is intended to send a message to state legislatures that a majority of the Senate supports codifying Roe.
And we'll trust you both to keep eyes on this, Courtney and Connor, tonight. Thank you both. The Fact Check team will continue to follow developments on this and several other important issues. You can also read this story with links to where they found all of their information on our website, thenationaldesk.com.
Right now, the summer surge is well underway with COVID cases on the rise in at least 20 states. The president himself still testing positive for COVID after testing negative just last week. This week, our Jan Jeff coach spoke with Amanda McClelland with Resolve to Save Lives about her thoughts on what's causing these so-called rebound cases.
Yeah, it's not unusual what happened to President Biden. As you said, we've seen it before in other high-profile cases, but in clinically as well, and it has to do with the medicine that he took. He took it for 5 days. There's some evidence now that we potentially need to take it for longer, but the current FDA or the approval process says we can only take it for 5 days and then we need a break. So the rebound effect just means the virus was still replicating in the body. We didn't get all the way down into the cells to stop that virus replication. But as you could see from President Biden's press conference, the symptoms are extremely mild and he remains well,
right,
which is what we're seeing with most patients.
So is it possible then to test positive for weeks on end?
Not for weeks on end, no, but definitely 4 days on end. So that 5-day recommendation from CDC, we have some indication that people are still testing positive, day 6 or day 7, but not for weeks, especially not with the rapid diagnostic test most people are using at home.
And are we seeing more reinfections, people who are being infected multiple times? Why is that?
So the virus continues to change and our immune system is keeping up with that. So the vaccine remains extremely effective, but it's not 100%. So even people that have been vaccinated are still getting sometimes infected with the newer variants. But often that sickness is very mild and people are recovering fairly quickly. We have seen what we call some immune escape. So as the virus changes, our immune system is struggling to keep up, and we have seen reinfections with some people getting COVID regularly. We're still working out the pattern. As you know, over the last 2.5 years, the virus continues to change, and we keep learning each time it does change in terms of what the pattern of reinfection and illness looks like.
Wow, so we are now seeing infections of people regularly. So are you more susceptible to being reinfected if you've had multiple infections already?
No, you're not more susceptible by any means. And there is some immunity where we're seeing people are immune from being infected and from the vaccine. But it does mean that you're not protected. You're not bulletproof when you go out. Just because you had COVID last week doesn't mean you can go out and not use any of the measures that we've been recommending. And as we see this surge and we're going into winter, the Southern Hemisphere, my country in Australia, there's a big surge in winter with the combination of the flu. And so we do need to get prepared for this ongoing transmission. People do need to mask in high-risk situations. We need to isolate if we're unwell.
California, Illinois, New York, now home to the nation's 3 largest cities, have reported 47% of all confirmed monkeypox infections in the U.S. Those states have declared a health emergency. Tell me what the biggest mistake you see right now with the messaging about this infection and the cause of its spread.
A bit like at the beginning of COVID, we're still learning a lot. So I think the biggest mistake we're making is we're being too tentative about saying what we do know and what we don't know. So this virus, similar to COVID, is changed. This is an old virus that we haven't seen a lot of transmission because of the smallpox vaccine for more than 30 years. It's been emerging over the last 5 to 6 years. This is the first time it's been spreading in this way. So I think there's two challenges with messaging. One, at the moment, it's very much occurring in a vulnerable population or a high-risk population, men who have sex with men, and we've been struggling to access that community and get messaging clear without creating stigma. And I think there's challenges in terms of really reaching out to that group and making sure that they understand the risks that they're in, but balancing that with creating stigma, because it can spread in other populations. It's not just a disease within that one community.
Now, we also asked the doctor about the treatment for monkeypox and the long-term risk. That interview posted right now at thenationaldesk.com. Schools across the country preparing for a staffing catastrophe. We're taking a closer look at one school district in need of dozens of teachers just weeks away from the first day of class. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. From a school staffing crisis in Oklahoma to a stolen dog found 6 years later in Texas. We're taking the pulse of America. We start with homeless encampments causing crime in Washington.
It's a mess. But the most important thing is the thievery that's been going on.
Drive along South 42nd Street in Tacoma. You're greeted by what neighbors are concerned about, a sprawling homeless camp with RVs, tents, and garbage. They say a bigger problem is spilling over to their doorsteps. Crime. Beverly Bowen Bennett has lived on her street for 22 years.
At night, I'm afraid, and it's filthy.
For the first time in a while, she now locks her back gate after someone recently broke into her shed.
I don't feel as safe as I did this time 2 years ago.
It is really sad. Samantha Pisana says just weeks ago, she had to call 911 after seeing a man with no pants in front of her home.
And he was going to the bathroom.
The city of Tacoma says they're aware of the camp and concerns.
We pay taxes, just the same as everybody else. We want a safe neighborhood. We want a clean neighborhood.
Frustrated neighbors meet with police in 3 weeks.
We've got to feel safe in our neighborhood.
A stark warning from the head of Oklahoma's largest public school district.
We have a situation in Oklahoma right now that is of catastrophic proportions.
That catastrophe is staffing shortages.
We need to act.
The Oklahoma Education Association is worried too.
We are getting ready to enter a decade of a teacher shortage.
Tulsa Public Schools didn't respond to our question about the number of openings. Catherine Bishop, president of the OEA, told us TPS has about 180. That's with less than 3 weeks until the first day of school.
It means you may not have a team member and a math teacher, a science teacher. It means larger class sizes for students. It's going to have a direct impact on your child's learning.
Districts are working to attract staff with more money.
It has to start at our elected leaders. It needs to start there and where they're making an investment in our public schools.
I was able to run the microchip and it came back to Stephanie.
I was like, you're kidding me. Like, this is insane. Like, where are you at?
I told him I was in like the Baytown, Houston area, and he said we're up in the Texas Panhandle.
Sheba, the 6-year-old German Shepherd, was stolen from the Malmstroms near Houston when she was only 10 months old.
We came back and she was gone.
Stephanie immediately flagged Sheba's chip as stolen. Then this week, 5 years and 600 miles later, Sheba was found running the streets in Borger.
I pulled up, opened up my door, long story short, and she just kind of hopped across my lap into my passenger seat and just sat down.
Sheba, who is in healthy and happy spirits, is now getting to go home to her long-lost family.
Like, wait, what? Like, they will fly her home? Like, it was just so unreal.
Sheba will board a flight and head back to her family in Baytown. Stephanie's 2 daughters, who were very young when Sheba was stolen, say they have missed her every day.
I want to give her a big hug. Same. Big hug. I might cry.
A new policing tool designed to keep people and officers safe. A look at the BOLA wrap and how many departments are already using it across America. Plus, the president facing some challenges from within his own party. Our Capitol Hill team explains next.
Our Washington Bureau covers Capitol Hill and D.C. every day to report on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. For some perspective on what's happening in the nation's capital, I'm joined by 2 of our Bureau correspondents, Atra Elnishar and Scott Thuman. Atra, the latest unemployment numbers released Friday. What do they tell us, and how does the overall economic picture look at this point?
Well, Steve, this was an uncomfortably hot jobs report that came from July. It showed that the unemployment rate ticked down to 3.5% after holding steady at 3.6 for the last couple of months, and more than 500,000 jobs were created, blowing expectations out of the water. This sounds like good news. Well, this time it just isn't. In any other economy, this would be what any president, any Federal Reserve would want to see. But in this high inflationary period where you want to actually slow down the economy, this just adds more fuel to the fight against the Federal Reserve's aggressive action to bring down inflation, which is currently at 9.1%. We're seeing people rely more on credit cards to keep up. Household debt is skyrocketing in the face of these high prices. So it's a really resilient labor market, and that's good news for anyone worried that we were in a recession right now. I don't know how you would justify that we are when 500,000 jobs were created in just 1 month. But it could make a recession more likely down the road, again, because it could push the Fed to act even more aggressively, even though they've taken some of the boldest actions that the central bank's taken in almost 30 years already.
Scott, the economy not the only challenge for President Biden these days. He's facing some challenges from within his own party.
Yeah, we're talking about the chatter for 2024 already, and while it may seem far off, there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be laid. The problem for Democrats, and specifically the president right now, is that a lot of people in his own party are hesitant to get on board with his reelection bid, or at least one that he said he plans to make. You have someone like Dean Phillips, a representative out of Minnesota, a Democrat, who said that he does not want the president to run again. He thinks there needs to be a different dynamic, a new, younger, more energized one. And then you have others like AOC or Senator Joe Manchin or Representative Jerry Nadler, who just aren't willing to give a full-throated endorsement at this time. Yes, the president's seeing 38% approval ratings. That's part of it. But also the president, even if he doesn't want to run, or even if he doesn't plan to, can't really say he'd risk becoming a lame duck, and Washington could be even more mired in gridlock than it already is.
And another challenge for the president, how to deal with WNBA star Brittany Griner, sentenced to 9 years in a Russian prison. Fill us in on the chatter over a potential prisoner swap, Scott.
Yeah, well, right now they're talking about potentially to get back Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan, who's been accused of espionage, is in a Russian prison. The U.S. might give up Victor Bout. He's called the merchant of debt. He is an arms dealer who also has been accused of trying to kill Americans, aiding a terrorist group, etc. So some people are saying this is a lopsided potential trade in favor of Russia. They don't love this idea, but others say this is, of course, what happens these days. Americans are targets, are going to be swept up by other nations, and they're going to be used as political leverage. That's what we may be watching unfold. By the way, about 60, according to one group, about 60 Americans right now held in overseas prisons in about 18 countries. So the problem persists regardless of this particular high-profile situation.
Chief Political Correspondent Scott Thuman, National Correspondent Atra Elnishar, thank you both. Eugene, back to you.
And thanks to our Capitol Hill team. Could a new invention change the way policing is approached here in America? The device that could save lives while keeping communities safe. We're back after this. For years now, there has been fierce debate over the use of force by law enforcement. Well, now there's a new tool designed to help officers de-escalate situations without hurting anyone or putting themselves in danger. Now, we warn you, you may find some of the scenes in this report disturbing. Here's the National Desk's Mark Hyman.
Hey, man. You come out and talk to us?
You're looking at police body camera footage from 2019 in South Carolina.
What you got going on today?
Deputies responded to 911 calls about a man named Stephen Gagliani who was reportedly acting strangely.
Put your hands behind your back.
The encounter would turn deadly.
Is he breathing?
According to court documents, deputies tased Gagliani, who was unarmed, 4 times, and a witness reported he was placed in a chokehold. For his father, Anthony, it's a recurring nightmare.
I still get up in that bed in the middle of the night, hearing Stephen say, "Help, help." And I wake up and it's not a dream, it's reality.
Officials ruled Stephen's death was a result of an undetermined cause while in custody of law enforcement.
They did not have to surround him and jump on him and taser him and choke him. Why did they have to do that?
Police use of force has become very controversial nationwide. Now, a new tool has the potential to reduce the number of deadly encounters. It's called BolaWrap. The device discharges a cord and hooks that safely immobilize someone from a distance, allowing officers to approach without causing injury.
Where the BolaWrap separates itself is it's not a weapon. It's a force avoidance tool. I have a 15-year-old son. If there were 15 officers against my 15-year-old son, I would prefer for all 15 officers to wrap my son simultaneously than any single one of those officers apply any means of conventional force.
BolaWrap is currently used in more than 600 of the nation's 18,000 law enforcement agencies, including here in Beaufort, South Carolina, where I got a first-hand look.
My BolaWrap will be armed. You cock it back.
Police Sergeant Mikhail Kopolov walked us through a hypothetical scenario.
Right now, it's armed and ready to go.
With me as a subject who's refusing to comply.
Bola, bola, bola.
It's loud, but the wrap doesn't hurt.
Mark, are you able to move at the moment?
I can't take my arms free. Captain George Erdl told us the Beaufort Police Department has about 6 BolaWraps right now, and they're making a difference.
BolaWrap enables the officer to do something they could not do before, which is basically restrain that person remotely, and it does it without inflicting any kind of pain. That's a groundbreaking option.
Do you think every agency should have one?
I think so. I think that we were part of, a small part of it, but I feel like we were part of helping to build that track record of showing, hey, this is a legitimate concept and this device actually works.
Works to prevent tragedies like the one Anthony Gagliani is still trying to cope with.
Every Sunday I go to Stephen. I sit on his memorial bench for memories, talk to him.
He's pushing for departments nationwide to be better trained to de-escalate situations and to adopt tools that would effectively reduce the need to use force.
You hear stories about defunding the police. I don't want the police defunded. I want them better trained to avoid another parent going through the nightmare I'm facing.
For Inside Your World Investigates, I'm Mark Hyman.
And that does it for this weekend edition of the National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can watch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Time. You want to check your local listings. You can also watch us online, catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Eugene Ramirez. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.